Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych. Hey, Mark, how you doing today?
I'm living the dream. How are you?
I'm living in a dream. I never know if it's a real dream or a nightmare.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah. So, you know, I've decided that in a dream, it all seems real. And then when you wake up, it goes away.
Well, pinch me.
I
need to wake
it's
up.
kind of like life, you know, we resist all and any changes and everything changes anyway. So go for it.
It's the only constant.
So we're in a time of great change right now. It seems like unavoidable. And now you and I are together talking on, what did we call this? The Zoom platform, I guess.
It's the Rumazum Zoom. It's
Okay.
the Alt Psych Cosmic Highway.
I like that. I like that. Is it the highway or a runway where we take off?
It's more like a taxiway.
There you go. Taxi.
We don't want to lose our visitors just yet.
Okay. You want to start this again?
No, we've started. That's it.
Okay.
We're in it.
We're
better
in it.
or
All right.
worse.
So, all right. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Richard Schulman, a psychologist, and my friend Mark Sylvester is across the universe, the nano universe. He's the best damn psychiatrist I ever met in my life, and I've met quite a few.
Well, that just sounds like a paid endorsement.
When are you going to pay me?
I know. I'm just saying, don't expect any money for this.
Okay, cool.
We need to explain what is
after
Alt
many
Psych.
years. After many years of threats and promises, we're finally working together.
And it is a parallel universe, indeed.
Okay, well, you said you were living the dream. I guess that's called a parallel universe.
So it's an alternate. It's what in the late great was he a psychiatrist? John Lilly said.
No, he was he was kind of a radical nut job.
No, he was an MD.
I don't think he was a psychiatrist, though.
I don't know. I'm going to Google that.
Please do.
And have someone post a comment below. But it's an alternity. It's an alternate reality. And that's what Alt Psych is. It's an alternity. It's an alternate universe to approach mental health, spiritual health, overall health and well-being. It's an alternative. Cool.
Yeah, you know, people ask me, I wrote this book a couple of years ago, and people ask me, well, who'd you write it for? I said, well, I wrote it for people who couldn't get well using the conventional methods. And because I was frustrated. And I've been going down the alternative road for quite some time, because in my world, kind of, if you did really well in conventional therapy, you might have only needed to talk to your barber or something. What we were looking at is something different for people who couldn't get well just by conventional therapy, conventional means. So we were looking in a different place. It kind of reminds me of a silly joke, because a guy's crawling on the floor in a parking lot, and somebody says, "What are you doing?" And the other guy says, "I lost my keys." He said, "Where'd you lose them?" "I lost them over there." "What are you looking here for?" "Well, the light is better here." Okay, we want to see where people drop their car keys where the light isn't better. You know,
yeah, and in my world, it's, wait, the red pill didn't work for you? Let's try the blue one.
And you know, there's a yellow one and a purple one too that they didn't talk about. There's a book I read years ago called The Dancing Healers, and it's about this conventional Yale-trained psychiatrist who has to give back instead of paying his loans, I guess, and he goes to an unserved population, like he goes to the Navajo reservation. So the Indian medicine chief comes up to the white medicine chief, and he says, you know, he confronts him, he says, "Tell me about the human mind in a short period of time." So this Yale-trained guy, he gets all puffed up. He goes, "That's impossible. I mean, there's psychobiology, there's chemistry, there's dynamics, there's early childhood learning, blah, blah, blah." He goes through this whole list. He goes, the Indian medicine chief goes, "Well, then you know nothing of the human mind." So the psychiatrist gets up really upset. He gets puffed up. He goes, "Well, then you tell me about the human mind in a short period of time." And the Indian goes, "It's a mystery, isn't it?" Well, we live in the mystery, because that's where the good stuff is. The good stuff is in the mystery. And I spent years and years and years wanting to embrace the mystery. And I know my pal, Mark Sylvester, has done that too. And when you go into the unknown, you, by definition, you don't know what you're going to find. So we don't go in with a preconceived notion, except that we're going to figure stuff out, help people to live better lives, more productive, happier, you know, healthier. That's the goal. That's what I want out of this.
Well, yeah, and it's to take the training that we've had, you know, that the classic training, and add everything else that we have, you know, learned through our experience, we've learned through other complementary and alternative approaches, the integrated health that you know I've gotten more involved with, looking at the functional psychiatry, looking at the actual hardware, the organism itself, and the messages it's sending to the brain, which confuse or confound, you know, what makes us, our personality, our behaviors, our temperaments, our spirit, our drive. Prozac doesn't work for that, you know.
And there's no doubt that we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely. And I mean, the giants that trained me was the pharmaceutical industry, and said Prozac can fix that. It's not been my experience, and I don't think it's a newsflash to people that in their experience that hasn't worked for them either. And that's why we've got
referring to giants of psychotherapy.
I know you were.
I know that you go way beyond what you learned from the pharmaceutical industry. That's for sure. I was talking about giants, like, actually, although I'm not Freudian, I think Freud was a giant. Jung, Reich, as we get further down the road, Stan Grof, who did holotropic breath work, to me is a giant. Brian Weiss, who did past life regression therapy, is another giant. Even John Upledger, who did somato-emotional release. These are people that I took a little bit from everybody, but it had to resonate with what I saw in front of me. If the theory doesn't work for a patient, you throw it away.
Right. And one of the things I think that the common denominator between us both is that we've learned how to become the shape of the tool that's needed for the job. And it's by combining elements of all of those giants. You know, my tongue-in-cheek pharmaceutical giant is precisely why the classic approach to psychiatry doesn't work, and why it's not fulfilling to me as a person, because I got into this field to help people, and I was helping such a small fraction of the population that had a Prozac deficiency.
Well, years ago, I studied with this Buddhist scholar named Anyan Rinpoche. And when I got started, he said to me, and this was unbelievable to me in my world, he said, you know, anything I tell you that doesn't resonate with your experience, with your life, throw it away. I said, what kind of religion is this? You know, you're telling me to throw away things that don't resonate with my life? But you know, that was great for me. And I was already doing that with my patients. I didn't come in with a preconceived notion, but it was such a great validation when he said that. Throw away anything that doesn't resonate with your experience of life is a great way to do psychotherapy and a great way to do spirituality. I don't want people telling me what my experience is. You know, I want somebody who will go there with me. And I like to go there with people, you know, and explore, because it's going to be in the end all about what's important to you. What gives your life meaning? I'm sure as hell not going to tell you what that is, but I'll help you explore it. And I'm not going to come in with a preconceived notion of what that is. A lot of therapists do that, and they miss.
So much of what, you know, it's so interesting with our different backgrounds and our different trainings. So much of the principles that guide us and that push us to strive to a higher level overlap so much. And I'm always like translating to my experience stories that you tell. So I got a story for you. It was the first day of my second year of medical school, and the very first lecture, you know, 8 a.m. or whatever, the professor says, you know, there's good news and bad news. The good news in this case was 10% of what we taught you last year, we know is wrong. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not very good news. The bad news is we don't know which 10%. And
Wow.
of course, I raised my hand. My first question was, does this mean we'll be getting 10% of our tuition back? Which was quite popular. He didn't laugh. But I'll never forget that moment, because it made me realize, this isn't the end all be all, state of the art, fanciest, up to date. This is all subject to a change. And what we think we know the best, there's a 1 in 10 chance that we're wrong. And so that
I love your story. I have a similar one. When I was meeting with the person who probably affected me more than any of my teachers, Dr. Jim Anker. And he said, I want you to listen to the music of a person's life, not the words. Well, I'm a music guy. Music is my drug, personally. It meant look for repeating patterns. Look for the score, so to speak, of a person's life. And he didn't want me to ignore the words. He was more interested in how a person said something, not what they said. Of course, you have to attend to what they say also. He also told me that in the process, I needed to be both a participant and an observer. So wrapping my head around how I could, sort of split my consciousness while I'm talking to a person was, to say the least, challenging. But once I got it, it was incredibly powerful. Because, people come to us and they're telling us stories. Eyewitness testimony is not exactly the most reliable. So you want to know, how do they tell you? And how do they relate to you? They don't know you from Adam, and they're going to start projecting stuff onto you right away.
Hopefully.
No, they're going to do it. They can't not do it. So you got to pick it up. And I had a teacher years ago who said to me, I'll tell you this, and you're going to look like a genius, but remember that the patient is always giving you the information. You just have to be sharp enough to pick up the information before they're consciously aware that they told it to you. Then you look like you're really smart. But always remember, be humble. Remember that the patient is the one giving you the information. I just feel that we really need to, in psychology, and I'm going to extrapolate to psychiatry, we need to expand our metaphors. Because when we limit what's important to a patient, then we're going to lose them. They're not going to want to listen because we're telling them what their experience is.
And that's one of the biggest complaints I hear, from psychiatry. And you and I have talked about this and why people think I'm so unique and different, and I'm puzzled. But that psychiatrists approach people as if they're diseases, as if they're, patients, and that there's that Prozac deficiency kind of.
Well, I think psychologists do the same thing with, by looking only at thoughts and behaviors. I have a patient who's a psychotherapist. She's a social worker. And she said to me, it was in my therapy with you that I learned I could be real in the session with my patients. And I said, what do you do instead of being real? There's only two, there's actually research on this about what people like in their therapists. They like basically two things: accurate empathy. Can I accurately identify what you're feeling? But the second is congruence. Am I the person that I'm presenting? And trust me, patients will see through us every time. Mm-hmm. I think my patients know when I'm off, like, oh, that's not good. Like that. Got to get that finger fixed. There you go. See, this is why I'm with Dr. Sylvester, because he is on it every freaking time.
I got two hands to snap with.
It's all like guitar playing. It screwed up my snapper. This one is okay. In any event, they want us to be real. We got to be real with them. And I always felt that I'm just sort of like everybody else who comes to see me, except maybe my life is a little wackier than theirs. And I've been trained in psychotherapy.
Yeah, but
we're all more human than anything else.
You told me how patients are so surprised, and they repeatedly say, hey, Dr. Sylvester talks to me like I'm a person, and that's this psychiatry equivalent of what you were saying before. And like, how are you being treated before? And I'm sad that makes me that unique. It's actually startling to me because I don't remember ever being trained to look, other than object relations theory, maybe, treat people as if they're specimens or
Well,
diseases or illnesses.
The whole title object relations tells you everything you want to know.
Yeah.
Objects relate. Well, what's the object? It's a person. That's the object. I mean, it's really, it took me about 1.5 years of studying before I figured out that part object meant like part of the person's face. It's like, it was a revelation. Anyway, it's another language. I think the bottom line is we have to be real. We have to be open to different ways of looking at the world. We have to join with our patient's model of the universe, and we have to have some kind of technique that goes beyond, so tell me about your mother again.
You need to scratch your beard when you say that. It would be more effective.
Tell me, Dr. Freud, yes. Tell me about your mother again. No, I prefer not. In any event, there are lots of good ideas from the past. I'm not throwing any of them away. My practice is built on things that I learned studying Carl Jung, Wilhelm Reich, Stanislav Grof, some of the people I mentioned earlier. Milton Erickson is a great influence on my career. But what taught me the most were actually the patients.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more that, it's a starting point for a career, sort of the classics and the giants. And maybe that's why they call it a practice. I just don't see in the real world other, like you said, therapists or psychiatrists or psychologists actually growing in that way and actually interacting with patients in that way. And I think it dovetails on what we were talking about, last week, why we do what we do. Like, why do we fundamentally do this? That was a tough question for me to explain to the med school committee, why I even want to go to med school, much less a residency program, because I was an engineer.
Weren't you supposed to say you wanted to help people?
Well, I said that, but it turns out when I
got to grad school, the director of clinical training said, we picked you guys. We had 400 applications. You have 12. Statistically, you don't exist. And we only picked the applications of people who didn't say, I want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he was kidding, but not really. Because their attitude towards psychotherapy was, well, you can't really hurt anybody with this. What a load of crap. You can hurt people pretty badly. And by the way, technique is for people who don't have any. Mm-hmm. Technique is the bare minimum. And, so people will say, well, what is your technique? I said, well, I've learned all the fundamentals. In fact, one of the first body therapists I worked with, because I do a lot of mind-body stuff, that's my sort of breakthrough, is to work with the body therapist and release energies trapped in the body. She said, you're a really good psychologist. I said, well, I would hope so if you're going to work with me. She said, I don't mean that. I mean, all the regular stuff. Yeah. Know your fundamentals. Absolutely.
And be motivated and driven, like you said, by the patient-centered approach and why we do what we do. I mean, I have been asked that question. I've been asked that question on applications and essays, but I've been asked that question a tremendous amount. I'm asked that question almost every single day. I just had a meeting and I was one of the questions. And on the surface, it is a thoughtful answer to say, to help people, but why? Why? And what's deeper than that? What's underneath that? And fundamentally, for me, it's to connect. It's about connection. It's about resonating and integrating with a person in their struggles and their challenges in their day-to-day life, whether that's psychological or if it's something more biological. That's fundamentally why I do what I do and why I can do it well, coming from a background of engineering and being very left-brained and analytical, because it appeases to my right brain and my connection and we all have that need for our social connection, for emotional connection. And that's
My,
really where the healing happens.
in my family, I was hammered with the idea you have to make the world a better place, leave the world a better place than you found it. Now, the weird part was in my family, if they drank, we would have been an alcoholic family. But since they didn't drink, we were just plain nuts. I was the person everybody talked to, except no one listened to me. And at a certain point, I said, "Screw you guys! I'm good at this. I'm gonna do this for my life's work." And it took me a while to get there, but it's kind of, I always knew what I wanted to do, and it was a strong message: leave the world a better place than you found it. And boy, today that's not such an easy task.
No.
But you know, with the difficulties that we're having now, what people like Mark Sylvester and myself do, and some other wonderful therapists and physicians that we know, it's going to matter more than ever. Not to make this into a different discussion, but I read an article the other day. Suicide attempts have been up 80% since the stay at home, and drug overdoses up 54% in Milwaukee. This article is in a Milwaukee newspaper. We're going to be in a post-traumatic stress field like no one's ever seen before, and it's already happening. And just telling people to cut it out is not going to be enough.
Is that what you call a segue? Because it turns out our topic for next week is the behavioral health toolkit for COVID-19.
Just goes to show you how powerful the unconscious mind is. You know, you're an engineer, and I was just kind of a nut job musical type hippie. But my best friend said, Richie, you never think. But there's some part of me that was ready to segue. So if we're ready to wrap up, are you ready to wrap up for today?
That's all the time we got for today. So join us next week. We're going to be talking all about this.
You know, everybody says to me, stay healthy. I'd say, protect your immune system. Peace out.
Be well.
Yes.